And now they came to the edge of the pack, and beyond it they could see Shiny Wall looming through mist and snow and storm. But the pack rolled horribly upon the swell, and the ice giants fought and roared, and leapt upon each other's backs and ground each other to powder, so that Tom was afraid to venture among them, lest he should be ground to powder too. And he was the more afraid when he saw lying among the ice pack the wrecks of many a gallant ship, some with masts and yards all standing, some with the seamen frozen fast on board. Alas! Alas for them! They were all true English hearts, and they came to their end like good knights errant in searching for the white gate that never was opened yet. But the good Mollies took Tom and his dog up and flew with them safe over the pack and the roaring ice giants, and set them down at the foot of the Shiny Wall. "And where's the gate?" asked Tom. "There's no gate," said the Mollies. "No gate?" cried Tom, aghast. "None, never a crack of one, and that's the whole of the secret, as better fellows, lad, than you have found to their cost. And if there had been, they'd have killed by now every right whale that swims the sea." "What am I to do then?" "Dive under the flow, to be sure, if you have pluck." "I've not come so far to town now," said Tom, "so here goes for a header." "A lucky voyage to you, lad," said the Mollies. "We knew you were one of the right sort. So goodbye." "Why don't you come too?" asked Tom. But the Mollies only wailed sadly, "We can't go yet, we can't go yet," and flew away over the pack. So Tom dived under the great white gate, which never was opened yet, and went on in black darkness at the bottom of the sea for 7 days and 7 nights, and yet he was not a bit frightened. Why should he be? He was a brave English lad, whose business is to go out and see all the world. And at last he saw the light, and clear, clear water overhead, and up he came 1,000 fathoms among clouds of sea moths which fluttered round his head. There were moths with pink heads and wings and opal bodies that flapped about slowly, moths with brown wings that flapped about quickly, yellow shrimps that hopped and skipped most quickly of all, and jellies of all the colours in the world that neither hopped nor skipped, but only dawdled and yawned and would not get out of his way. The dog snapped at them till his jaws were tired, but Tom hardly minded them at all. He was so eager to get to the top of the water and see the pool where the good whales go. And a very large pool it was, miles and miles across, though the air was so clear that the ice cliffs on the opposite side looked as if they were close at hand. All around it the ice cliffs rose in walls and spires and battlements and caves and bridges and stories and galleries in which the ice fairies live. Drive away the storms and clouds that Mother Carey's pool may lie calm from year's end to year's end. And the sun acted policeman and walked round outside every day, peeping just over the top of the ice wall to see that all went right. And now and then he played conjuring tricks, or had an exhibition of fireworks to amuse the ice fairies, for he would make himself into 4 or 5 suns at once, or paint the sky with rings and crosses and crescents of white fire, stick himself in the middle of them, wink at the fairies, and I say they were very much amused, for anything's fun in the country. And there were good whales lay, the happy sleepy beasts still upon the still oily sea. They were all right whales, you must know, and finners and razorbacks and bottlenoses, and spotted sea unicorns with long ivory horns. But the sperm whales are such raging, ramping, roaring, rumbustious fellows that if Mother Carey let them in, there'd be no more peace in Peacepool. So she packs them away in a great pond by themselves at the South Pole, 263 miles south-southeast of Mount Erebus, the great volcano in the ice. And there they butt each other with their ugly noses, day and night, from year's end to year's end. But here there were only good, quiet beasts, lying about like the black hulls of sloops, and blowing every now and then jets of white steam, or sculling round with their huge mouths open for the sea moths to swim down their throats. There were no threshers there to thresh their poor old backs, or swordfish to stab their stomachs, or sawfish to rip them up, or ice sharks to bite lumps out of their sides, or whalers to harpoon and lance them. They were quite safe and happy, and all they had to do was to wait quietly in Peacepool till Mother Carey sent for them to make them out of old beasts into new. Tom swam up to the nearest whale and asked the way to Mother Carey. "There she sits in the middle," said the whale. Tom looked, but he could see nothing in the middle of the pool but one peaked iceberg, and he said so. "That's Mother Carey," said the whale, "as you will find when you get to her. There she sits, making old beasts into new, all the year round." "How does she do that?" "That's her concern, not mine," said the old whale, and yawned so wide, for he was very large, that there swam into his mouth 943 sea moths, 13,846 jellyfish no bigger than pins' heads, a string of salpie 9 yards long, and 43 little ice crabs, who gave each other a parting pinch all round, tucked their legs under their stomachs, and determined to die decently, like Julius Caesar. "I suppose," said Tom, "she cuts up a great whale like you into a whole shoal of porpoises." At which the old whale laughed so violently that he coughed up all the creatures, who swam away again, very thankful for having escaped out of that terrible whalebone net of his, from which bourne no traveller returns. And Tom went to the iceberg wondering, and when he came near it, it took the form of the grandest old lady he had ever seen, a white marble lady, sitting on a white marble throne, and at the foot of the throne there swam away, out and out into the sea, millions of newborn creatures, of more shapes and colours than man ever dreamed. And they were Mother Carey's children, whom she makes out of the sea-water all day long. He expected, of course, like some grown people who ought to know better, to find her snipping, piecing, fitting, stitching, cobbling, basting, filing, planing, hammering, turning, polishing, moulding, measuring, chiselling, clipping, and so forth, as men do when they go to work to make anything. But instead of that, she sat quite still, with her chin upon her hand, looking down into the sea with two great grand blue eyes, as blue as the sea itself. Her hair was as white as snow, for she was very, very old. In fact, as old as anything which you're likely to come across, except the difference between right and wrong. When she saw Tom, she looked at him very kindly. "What do you want, my little man? It's so long since I've seen a water baby here." And Tom told her his errand and asked the way to the other end of nowhere. "You ought to know yourself, for you've been there already." "Have I, ma'am? I'm sure I forget all about it." "Then look at me." And as Tom looked into her great blue eyes, he recollected the way perfectly. Now was that not strange? "Thank you, ma'am," said Tom. "Then I won't trouble your ladyship any more. I hear you're very busy." "I am never more busy than I am now," she said, without stirring a finger. "I heard, ma'am, that you were always making new beasts out of old." "Oh, so people fancy. But I'm not going to trouble myself to make things, my little dear. I sit here and make them make themselves." "You are a clever fairy indeed," thought Tom, and he was quite right. That is a grand trick of good old Mother Carey's, and a grand answer which she has had occasion to make several times to impertinent people. There was once, for instance, a fairy who was so clever that she found out how to make butterflies. I don't mean sham ones, no, but real live ones, which would fly and eat and lay eggs and do everything that they ought. And she was so proud of her skill that she went flying straight off to the North Pole to boast to Mother Carey how she could make butterflies. But Mother Carey laughed. "No, silly child," she said, "that anyone can make things if they'll take time and trouble enough. But it's not everyone who, like me, can make things make themselves." But people do not yet believe that Mother Carey is as clever as all that comes to. And they will not till they too go the journey to the other end of nowhere. "And now, my pretty little man," said Mother Carey, "you are sure you know the way to the other end of nowhere?" Tom thought, and behold, he had forgotten it utterly. "That is because you took your eyes off me." Tom looked at her again and recollected, and then looked away and forgot it in an instant. "What am I to do, Mum? For I can't keep looking at you when I'm somewhere else." "Oh, you must do without me, as most people have to do, for 999 thousandths of their lives. Look at the dog instead, for he knows the way well enough, and will not forget it. Besides, you may meet some very queer-tempered people there, who will not let you pass without this passport of mine, which you must hang round your neck and take care of. And, of course, as the dog will always go behind you, you must go the whole way backward." "Backward?" cried Tom. "Then I shall not be able to see my way." "On the contrary, if you look forward, you will not see a step before you, and be certain to go wrong. But if you look behind you, and watch carefully whatever you have passed, and especially keep your eye on the dog, who goes by instinct, and therefore can't go wrong, then you will know what is coming next, as plainly as if you saw it in a looking-glass." Tom was very much astonished, but he obeyed her, for he had learnt always to believe what the fairies told him. "So it is, my dear child," said Mother Carey, "and I will tell you a story which will show you that I am perfectly right, as it is my custom to be. Once upon a time there were two brothers. One was called Prometheus, because he always looked before him, and boasted that he was wise beforehand. The other was called Epimetheus, because he always looked behind him, and did not boast at all, but said humbly, like the Irishman, that he had sooner prophesy after the event. Well, Prometheus was a very clever fellow, of course, and invented all sorts of wonderful things. But unfortunately, when they were set to work was just what they would not do. Wherefore very little has come of them, and very little is left of them, and now nobody knows what they were, save a few archaeological old gentlemen, who scratch in queer corners, and find little there save tinum furum blaptim mortisagam acarum horridum and tineum laciniarum. But Epimetheus was a very slow fellow, certainly, and went among men for a clod and a muff and a milksop and a slow coach and a bloke and a boodle and so forth, and very little he did for many years, but what he did he never had to do over again. And what happened at last? There came to the two brothers the most beautiful creature that ever was seen, Pandora by name, which means all the gifts of the gods. But because she had a strange box in her hand, this fanciful, forecasting, suspicious, prudential, theoretical, deductive, prophesying Prometheus, who was always settling what was going to happen, would have nothing to do with pretty Pandora and her box. But Epimetheus took her and it, as he took everything that came, and married her, for better or for worse, as every man ought, whenever he has even the chance of a good wife. And they opened the box between them, of course, to see what was inside, for else what possible use could it have been to them? And out flew all the ills which flesh is heir to, all the children of the four great bogies, self-will, ignorance, fear and dirt. For instance, measles, famines, monks, quacks, scarlatina, unpaid bills, idols, tight stays, whooping coughs, potatoes, popes, bad wine, wars, despots, peacemongers, demagogues, and worst of all, naughty boys and girls. But one thing remained at the bottom of the box, and that was hope. So Epimetheus got a great deal of trouble, as most men do in this world, but he got the 3 best things in the world into the bargain: a good wife, and experience, and hope. While Prometheus had just as much trouble, and a great deal more, as you will hear, of his own making, with nothing besides save fancies spun out of his own brain, as a spider spins her web out of her stomach. And Prometheus kept on looking before him so far ahead that as he was running about with a box of lucifers, which were the only useful things he ever invented and do as much harm as good, he trod on his own nose and tumbled down, as most deductive philosophers do, whereby he set the Thames on fire, and they have hardly put it out again yet. So he had to be chained to the top of a mountain with a vulture by him to give him a peck whenever he stirred, lest he should turn the whole world upside down with his prophecies and his theories. But stupid old Epimetheus went working and grubbing on with the help of his wife Pandora, always looking behind him to see what had happened, till he really learnt to know now and then what would happen next, and understood so well which side his bread was buttered, and which way the cat jumped, that he began to make things which would work, and go on working too, to till and drain the ground, and to make looms and ships, and railroads and steam ploughs and electric telegraphs, and all the things which you see in the great exhibition, and to foretell famine and bad weather, and the price of stocks, and, what is hardest of all, the next vagary of the great idol whirligig, which some call public opinion. Till at last he grew as rich as a Jew, and as fat as a farmer, and people thought twice before they meddled with him, but only once before they asked him to help them. For because he earned his money well, he could afford to spend it well likewise. And his children are the men of science who get good, lasting work done in the world. But the children of Prometheus are the fanatics, and the theorists, and the bigots, and the bores, and the noisy, windy people who go telling silly folk what will happen, instead of looking to see what has happened already. Now, was not Mother Carey's a wonderful story? And I'm happy to say Tom believed it every word, for so it happened to Tom likewise. He was very sorely tried, for though by keeping the dog to heels, or rather to toes, for he had to walk backwards, he could see pretty well which way the dog was hunting, yet it was much slower work to go backwards than to go forwards. But what was more trying still, no sooner had he got out of Peacepool than there came running to him all the conjurers, fortune-tellers, astrologers, prophesiers, projectors, prestidigiators, as many as were in those parts, and there are too many of them everywhere. Old Mother Shipton on her broomstick with Merlin, Thomas the Rhymer, Gibbertus, Rabanus, Morus, Nostradamus, Zadkiel, Raphael, Moore, old Nixon, and a good many in black coats and white ties, who might have known better, considering in what century they were born, all bawling and screaming at him, "Look ahead! Only look ahead, and we will show you what man never saw before, and right away to the end of the world." But I'm proud to say that though Tom had not been to Cambridge, for if he had, he would have certainly been a senior wrangler, he was such a little dogged, hard, gnarly, foursquare brick of an English boy that he never turned his head round once all the way from Peacepool to the other end of nowhere, but kept his eye on the dog, let him pick out the scent, hot or cold, straight or crooked, wet or dry, uphill or down dale, by which means he never made a single mistake, and saw all the wonderful and hitherto by no mortal man imagined things, which it is my duty to relate to you in the next chapter.